Here's an individual who thought a lot about his gig. Some of you may know him. Most of you probably don't. He's a CEO. Before he was a CEO, he was a consultant, Harvard undergrad, Harvard MBA. I think he worked for Bain. But he realized he wasn't passionate about it, et cetera, et cetera. But in his family, there was a history of brewing, kind of brewmasters. So he said, great, that sounds great, right? And everybody's interested. So he said, I really am passionate about this. And I think I can be good at it because I've got a whole generations to learn from, and I can talk to relatives and study it. And I think there's a market for it, especially if it's unusual and has kind of a distinctive taste. And so what he created was Sam Adams. Right? So he created this beer company. And he doesn't have the ambitions you have. In fact, we interviewed him last year, and he said, look, my objective for Sam Adams is to go from being tiny to very small in the industry, but still highly profitable and the biggest microbrewery. But what he said interesting about his gig, he said, I had no idea how to do this, but once I was passionate and I went after this and I found out what I was trying to do in life, and when I looked for ideas, they were all around me like radio waves. They were everywhere I looked on how to make Sam Adams a market leader. But they were only available when I tuned into them by knowing my passion, by understanding my gig. And so for Jim Koch, like yourselves, what are you passionate about? Tune into those ideas. That's a key step in being an idea hunter. Once you understand what you want to become great at, what your gig is, this is Tom Watson Jr. His father started IBM, but Tom Watson Jr. is the one that created 80% of the market share way back when. And I think this is a great line. He says, I'm not a genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. What are your spots? And the key is, for an idea hunter, enlarge those spots every day. And it can't be everything. You can't be everything to all people. And it can't be too narrow, and maybe it has to be broader, but it's worth thinking about it. So, prepare now to hunt. You have a sense of the value of ideas in terms of economic progress, in terms of your progress. You have an example of how people move ideas and get them from other places. We've talked about your gig, what your purpose is. You have a vision for as a firm. It's an exciting vision. Now, how do we hunt and get ideas and be smarter? There's 4 elements. The first one is to be more interested than interesting. This, to me, is absolutely essential. Be more interested than interesting. And I've worked, before I became a dean at BC, I worked at a school in Switzerland called IMD for 10 years. I was there 12 years in total. IMD is in Lausanne, Switzerland. Great place to live, great place to raise a family, great place to work with executives. It's all I did, work with people like you every day. And I used to think that people who were interesting to others were more successful in life. And I learned not to believe that anymore. That the most successful, effective leaders, professionals, managers that I've met are interested in the world around them. They have that curiosity. They have that appetite. They're learning machines. And that's the first step, is become interested in the world and what you're trying to get done. The second step is diversify. Avoid the same trail as everybody else. Study after study. We'll have time for some questions. You don't need to know all the academic, but every study, diverse sources for ideas are where novel, important innovation, creativity comes from. Basically, don't hang out with people that look like all of us. Hang out with weird people. That's where the ideas are. That's where the ideas are. Hang out with people in other industries, crazy industries. Learn about their processes, their approach to clients, their approach to customers, whatever they do, those are where the nuggets are. So avoid the same trail others take. Exercise daily. This is tough. We're all busy. We all don't have enough time. I walked into that gym this morning. Every machine was filled. So we have time to exercise that way, and we all need it, right? But we also need to exercise our brain. So exercise daily. And finally, you need to be agile. Phil Schiller at Apple, he was agile. He realized what he saw earlier in his career could be applied to something today. You try ideas and you fail. failure should be a badge of honor. So IDEA. Let's go through some examples and make it more concrete and tangible. If we think about interested, I think about this individual right here. Who is it? Walt Disney. And Walt Disney was, when you read about him and all he did, he was a consummate idea hunter. And early on, Walt Disney was into animation. And Disney had artists in these studios, and they were really smart artists. And they even specialized in different areas of art. And he had rows and rows of these artists. So one day, one of these artists came in, and he realized that something that he threw out the day before in his garbage can, early the previous day, the morning, he came in, and on his desk, the artist's desk, there was a crumpled piece of paper opened up. And on the piece of paper was this: don't give up on this idea so easily. There's really merit to this. It has great legs. The signature was Walt. Walt Disney was so interested in what those artists were thinking, he was going through their garbage cans at night. Right? Because he knew the best ideas for the next breakthrough in animation wasn't in his head, it was in the heads of those artists. And he didn't want to see the filtered ideas, he wanted to see what they were working with. And he was going through those garbage cans because of his curiosity in moving ideas forward, and those ideas turned out to be something like Goofy Dog. Right? So it doesn't come easily, but it was curiosity in the garbage that led to that. Disney also was on vacation with Art Linkletter. Some of you may remember Art Linkletter, famous TV show personality. They were in Europe, and they went here, Tivoli Gardens, Copenhagen. Right? And I was there just for the first time. I lived in Europe all those years. I never went there. I went there a couple of years ago, and I walked in, and I knew this story, and I said, now I understand the story I'm about to tell you. I walked in. It was beautiful. Oldest amusement park in Europe, and beautiful flowers, meandering paths, lights. There was music. There were children. There were adults. There was all this stuff going on. What does that look like? Look like the Magic Kingdom? Disney went there. They were going to spend a few hours there, but he had an objective. This was in the 50s. He wanted to create an amusement park that adults and children could enjoy, not the kind of seedy little place that I like to hang out in, right? But he wanted a fun, clean amusement park for everybody in the family. So that was his objective. But he went on vacation just for having vacation, but he saw that, and he looked at Art Linkletter, and he said, this is it. Linkletter said, what's it? He said, this is what I'm bringing back. So instead of spending 2 hours at Tivoli Gardens, they spent 2 days. And they measured, and he looked at it, and he took pictures, and he basically took Tivoli Gardens back, and he scaled it up a few hundred times, and he created this. So the idea for the Magic Kingdom, which really started the theme park empire, started over in Copenhagen. On vacation, Disney was always switched on to new ideas. And these ideas have changed the world. So interested is fundamental to being a great idea hunter. The second element is diversified. Warren Buffett, when he was young, he wanted to become the world's greatest investor. That was his objective early on. He didn't know how, he didn't know his approach, he didn't know his method, but he wanted to be a great investor. Warren Buffett, in his spare time, was a fan of baseball. Right? And who's that? Ted Williams, Red Sox. And Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting. And Buffett was reading that book one night, and when he read it, Ted Williams was a true scientist about the art of hitting. And he read that book, and he saw this in the book. He saw this picture, which is the strike zone, and Williams broke the strike zone into like 79 different baseball-size areas. So this is Ted Williams, how he thought about hitting. And it's all in this book. And Buffett's going through this book, and he then says the next page has this picture. 400 in the middle, 380, 370, 360. On the outside and the lower, 280, 240, 260, and so forth. What's the message? Ted Williams' message is what? I'm going to become a great hitter by doing what? Swinging on what comes down the middle. Because if I swing on the edge, I may not get hits as good as I am. So I have to develop a disciplined eye and only swing at pitches called his circle of competence. That's where I'm swinging. So Buffett read this and said, that's a very disciplined approach to hitting a baseball. I can use that elsewhere. I only want to swing at investments I understand and that I view as safe. No risks. Only when I understand how the firm makes money and really I have high confidence. Only in that circle of competence. And Williams' book, and some smart professors from Columbia and elsewhere, but Williams was the catalyst to value investing for Buffett. He was so interested in that, and he's reading baseball, and he applied it. And that's a very diverse source, right? Who would have thought that baseball affected Buffett and his whole philosophy? Thomas Edison, kind of hero of mine, written about him in a lot of different ways. But Edison, the lone genius, the Wizard of Menlo Park, and there he is, but he wasn't a lone genius. He changed the world 6 or 7 times with major inventions, recorded sound, electric light, so forth and so on. But what Edison did, the world's first self-acknowledged knowledge professional, what Edison did is he created a factory to process change and process innovation. It's in Menlo Park, New Jersey. He created the world's first systematic invention factory, but it wasn't Edison alone. In the factory were all these individuals, and he called them the muckers. These were unpaid apprentices, and there was like 40 or 50 of them from around the world. And he had constant people applying. They were unpaid, but they got the residuals from the patents and so forth. So many became very rich. But they applied from all over the world to work with Edison. But he selected people from Africa, Asia, Europe, in Europe, Switzerland, France, England, North America, South America, and why? Because in terms of diversity, Edison was interested in the color of the ideas. He wanted people with diverse backgrounds. He didn't want a bunch of people like himself. He understood the power of diversity, so much so that before they got the job, not only did he want this kind of diverse motif on his team, but when he got the job, when they applied to the job, he had them take a test of 150 questions. The test had nothing to do with science or technology at the time. It was geography, it was art, it was history, it was music, and they had to pass that test, 90% right. He wanted not just diverse individuals from diverse cultures, he wanted diverse thinkers. He didn't want narrow people. So these muckers were the best scientists and broad in their understanding of the world. He thought that was key to his invention factory.